Hi, my name is Elizabeth Turner, and today's presentation is on test integrity, administration, and analysis in nursing education. Before we dive into the details, I do want to take a minute to go over what we'll be covering in this session. We will first look at some best practices for administering exams, ways that can help to promote fairness and prevent academic dishonesty. Next, we will use Exemplify for our assessment. I'll walk through some specific steps we can take to preserve test integrity within that platform. Then we'll shift to the importance of test analysis. And finally, we'll finish by looking at a few different approaches to student test reviews. Now that we've gone over our objectives, let's take a closer look at the first area, test administration and integrity. You can really tell a lot about how an exam is going to go just by looking at the way the room is set up. When students walk in and see that some thought has gone into the seating, it helps to set the tone. To some, assigned seating may not seem like a big deal, but in actuality, it means that there's no debate about who's sitting where, and it really does level the playing field before the first test question is even answered. Another thing to consider is the use of alternated seating. Something as simple as just leaving a little extra space goes a long way. When talking about personal belongings, guidelines and expectations for testing should really be provided to students from the very beginning so that there's no question about what is and what is not allowed in testing rooms. All personal type items such as bags, phones, smartwatches should be placed along the wall or at the front of the room, completely out of the student's reach. Students are allowed to have their laptop with Exemplify installed, a charger if needed, and their school ID. When it comes to what the student can actually have at their desk during testing, it's important to keep things very simple and consistent. Note cards, phones, calculators, watches, or earbuds are not allowed at the student's desk. Those items, even if unintentional, can create opportunities for distraction as well as dishonesty, and it's just not worth the risk. If faculty decided to allow it, students may have a single sheet of plain paper and a pen or pencil. The good news is, with Exemplify's secure browser, students aren't able to open other programs, websites, or files once the test begins. So a clean workspace combined with the software's lockdown feature really does help us maintain a fair and focused testing environment. It is so important for us as educators to understand that supporting students who have accommodation isn't just about meeting the legal requirements and guidelines, it's about doing what's right for the student. And that's going to begin with us working very closely with student services to make sure everything that the student needs is in place. Whether it's extended time, a quieter setting, or specific equipment for the student to be successful, those details need to be arranged and taken care of well before testing day. It's also important that we document all accommodations clearly, just to ensure transparency and consistency if any questions come up at a later time. When we take steps like these, we're doing more than just making and enforcing rules. We're minimizing the chance for academic dishonesty by removing temptation and creating a testing environment where the focus is exactly where it should be, on the student and the material. It also brings a much needed level of consistency to the table. Everyone is held to the same standard. This is how we build trust, not just in the results of the test, but in the actual testing process itself. The fact is that part of our role is making sure we're following legal and ethical guidelines, especially when it comes to testing and accommodations. It's not just about compliance, it's about protecting both the student and the integrity of the program. Let's talk about test analysis. Once the exam is over, that's really when our analysis begins. First, we need to export the data directly from ExamSoft or Exemplify. This report will give educators an exact breakdown of how each student performed, not just on the overall test, but on each individual question. The first one is how the test scores are distributed. This will help us get a better sense of whether the exam was too easy, too hard, are just right for the subject matter being tested. We then need to look at the item difficulty. This tells us how many students answered each individual question correctly. From here, we look at the discrimination index. This helps us compare how the stronger students performed against the weaker students in the course. The goal is to identify any pattern and trends which may help us spot any potential red flags. After we've pulled the data from ExamSoft, the next thing we look at is the item difficulty index, also known as the p-value. This value tells us the percentage of students that got a particular question correct. A p-value close to 1 means the question is too easy, while a value closer to 0 means it was too difficult. Ideally, we want most of our questions to fall somewhere in the middle, not too easy and not too hard. Next is the discrimination index. This shows whether our questions helped separate students who really understood the material from those who didn't. If a question has a strong discrimination value, it means students who did well in the exam overall also got the item correct. That's exactly what we want. But if the discrimination is low or worse, negative, it may be a sign that the question was confusing or poorly aligned. We also need to evaluate the mean, the median, as well as the standard deviation of the scores. Together, these numbers help us better understand whether the test was fair and actually reflected what was taught in the course. KR20, short for the Cooter-Richardson Formula 20, is used to measure the internal consistency of an exam. Typically, this is useful for tests made up of multiple choice or true-false type questions. Reason being, these types of questions have specific correct and incorrect answers, making it easier to track how reliable the test is as a whole. A KR20 score of 0.70 or above is usually a good sign, meaning the questions are consistent, the difficulty is balanced, and the exam is likely measuring what it is supposed to. A solid score tells us that the test is holding together well, that it wasn't just a random mix of questions tossed into a page. Now, if the score is low, that's a sign that we might need to take a closer look and review it. Some of the questions may not align with the rest of the test, or that test possibly may cover too broad a range of information. It doesn't automatically mean the test is bad, but it does tell us we may need to do some refining of our test. When we talk about the quality of a test, we're really talking about the reliability and validity of the test. Reliability looks at the test's consistency, while validity, on the other hand, looks at if the test is measuring what it's supposed to. Both are equally important if we want to be confident in the results we're seeing. We've already discussed KR20, which helps us measure how consistent the questions are within the test itself. We also look at internal consistency. In other words, do the items within the test seem to be measuring the same general concept, or are they completely disconnected? We also want to look at the test's validity. The content validity is where the test blueprinting comes into play. Construct validity is about making sure the test questions are aligned with the intended learning outcomes. And criterion-related validity compares the student's ability to ATI or NCLEX style benchmarks. Now that we've looked at how to administer exams and analyze the results, let's shift to the final piece of the process, student test review. There are a few different ways we can approach test reviews. The key is to find a method that fits your teaching style, but also protects the integrity of the test while offering students a meaningful learning experience. One-on-one reviews are the most personalized. However, they can take a lot of time, especially if you're working within a large group. Group reviews are much more efficient. However, the downside is that it's harder to control how much test content is shared. LMS or Learning Management System-based reviews can be set up through the platforms such as ExamSoft and offer a nice middle ground. This is great for protecting test content, but it doesn't allow for much real-time clarification. Written feedback provides students with a summary of their missed concepts, but it does miss out on the opportunity for dialogue, which can be really valuable when a student is trying to understand where they went wrong. While there is no perfect solution, we can choose the option that best supports both student and learning test security. When we do offer a test review, there are a few best practices that can help us make the review time useful without compromising the integrity of the test. It's important to focus on rationales, not just the right answers. That's where the deeper learning happens. Self-reflections give the students opportunities to think about their approach, where their thinking may have gone off track, and how they might approach the similar questions in the future. Some students experience high test-taking anxiety. Helping them recognize those patterns and giving them different strategies to help manage that stress can really make a difference in how they perform moving forward. And finally, we really want to be careful not to share the exact test questions, especially if we're reusing them. That way, we're protecting the integrity of our assessment while still supporting student understanding. As we close, I just want to bring up a few final thoughts. I think it's important that we remember that integrity in testing doesn't start with the gradebook. It starts with how we prepare the environment. When we take the time to set up fair, structured testing conditions, we give students the chance to truly show what they know. Then we have tools like the KR20 and item analysis, which help us evaluate whether our exams are actually doing their jobs. Student reviews, when done thoughtfully, can turn test results into learning opportunities. They help students take ownership of their performance and better understand how to improve going forward. In the end, when these pieces come together, administration, analysis, and review, we're not just giving tests, we're building a system that supports learning, holds everyone accountable, and reflects the standards of quality that we expect in nursing education. Thank you for your time.